Good morning, good morning. Giving everybody a few moments to come in from I almost said the break room. It's too early, from the waiting room. I hope everybody is doing well this morning. I think I'm feeling good because the sun is shining and it's not quite as cold today. So I hope you all are riding that wave as well. I am filling in for Brittany today. Brittany is out of the office this week, getting some much needed R&R. So you have me as your host this morning, along with our excellent guest. I still see a couple folks trickling in from the waiting room. So we'll give everybody just a moment and get started here in 1 minute. Sunshine in Toledo. Excellent. Yeah. I hope everyone's seeing that all over the state. I don't really know, but if it's in Toledo and it's in Columbus, I feel good about the chances that other folks have. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. And can I just confirm with my team, are we recording? Because I see that there is a note taker. I just want to make sure it's ours. Okay, awesome. Great. Well, I don't want to take up too much of the air in the room today, but I will start with a couple updates. Not too much going on because the Ohio House is in recess and the Ohio Senate has just one session date scheduled for this month. Otherwise, members in both chambers will primarily be in district until after the May 5th primary election. Earlier this week, though, so since we last saw each other last Thursday, I believe it was on Monday, that controlling board approved the $404 million in federal funding through the Rural Health Transformation Program. If this is a story you haven't been following, because there have been many stories that follow at the same time, this category of funds is coming from the federal government as set aside by HR 1, which was that major budget reconciliation package from 2025. So the funds approved by the controlling board in Ohio this week includes, as part of that 404 million total, it does include 14 million over the biennium, so 7 million per fiscal year for rural, maternal, and child health specifically. We are watching for some more exact details. We know that there will have to be sort of a bidding process or contracts with individual hospitals that provide care in rural areas. So we don't know any more than this really, but the language approved by the controlling board does require a minimum of 30 million per fiscal year to be given to projects that would increase access to maternal care in rural communities. So we are excited to see that. Glad to see that moving forward, and more details to come. Late last week on the federal level, President Trump released a proposed budget for federal fiscal year 2027. I know it seems like we just did 2026, and here we are. While the president's proposal is just the first step in a much longer process, there will be many hearings through Congress. There are some decreases and eliminations to be aware of that have been proposed for federal fiscal year 27 as compared to federal fiscal year 26. This includes decreases for the WIC program and level fundings for some other programs like CCDBG and Head Start, Early Head Start. Those level funding programs really act like a cut due to not keeping pace with inflation. There are several proposed eliminations as well, including the Preschool Development Block Grant Birth Through Age 5, or PDG-B5, of which Ohio is a recipient, and additional eliminations to programs that support infant early childhood mental health, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and others. So keep an eye out for opportunities to engage there and to raise your voice. And now I will turn it over to our guest speaker, Danielle McCament. And if I could request that everyone who's not on mute to be on mute, thank you so much. Danielle is the CEO of the Ohio Network of Children's Advocacy Centers. We are so excited to have her with us today. As the network leader, she works collaboratively with center directors across Ohio, as well as statewide organizations that have a vested interest in providing services to children who have experienced abuse. Danielle has led the organization to receive its first ever state level funding and has transformed the organization from an unknown to a recognized statewide group of experts in the field of child maltreatment. And prior to leading the Ohio Network for Children's Advocacy Centers, Danielle served in Governor DeWine's administration as the Chief Legislative Officer at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Danielle, I will turn it over to you. Feel free to share your screen and kick us off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I think I can do this.
You've got this, and let us know if you need support.
All right.
That looks great.
Perfect. Thank you. So, like she said, my name is Danielle McCament, and I'm the CEO of the Ohio Network of Children's Advocacy Centers. I'm so excited to be here today with you all and really appreciate Groundwork Ohio's continued partnership. So we'll go ahead and dive in. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and I would like to share that in 2025, the Ohio Network of Children's Advocacy Center member centers provided prevention education to over 80,000 kids throughout Ohio. And I think that's a really great number, and it's probably a little bit higher than that. But what's great about this is when you have a child advocacy center director or prevention specialist who is actually in the schools providing the education, a lot of times we will have disclosures as we're providing the education, and children's advocacy centers are uniquely organized to deal with those disclosures and start the wraparound services immediately. So big proponent of the prevention education. What is the Ohio Network of Children's Advocacy Centers? So we are the statewide association. Our mission is to promote the establishment and success of multidisciplinary teams and child advocacy centers by providing support, education, and networking opportunities to enhance Ohio's response to child abuse. The structure of the Children's Advocacy Center network, you can see there in the middle, NCA, that's the National Children's Alliance. That's our national chapter. That's also the accrediting body. So one thing that really sets children advocacy centers apart is every children advocacy center, state chapter and local chapter, has to go through an accreditation process every 5 years. There are 9 standards of accreditation. They're stringent. They change every 5 years based on the most recent evidence-based best practice in the field. And it really provides families and multidisciplinary team partners surety that when they're coming to a children's advocacy center, regardless of location, you're going to get that same standard of care. Ohio CAC, so you can see there on the map, I'll explain this map a little bit. The blue counties are actually counties where there's a physical CAC located. So in that county, you go there, there's a CAC, and it'll provide services to not only that county, but perhaps some neighboring counties. The counties that are in gray do not have a physical CAC, but they have a memorandum of understanding with all of their multidisciplinary team partners in that county to provide services to those children. So unfortunately, you can see we have quite a few counties in white. That does not mean that a child in those counties cannot be seen at a CAC. What it means is that there is not formal established coverage. So there's not going to be the case review component that brings that multidisciplinary team together to wrap around. That child might still go and receive a forensic interview, but they're not going to have the entire team wrap around. And so we really want every county to have that formal MOU with their prosecutor and with their child protective services, so that family gets the same standard of care that families do in the counties that are in the blue and gray. So we have 38 physical locations. You'll see Marion County actually should be in the blue. They just signed on yesterday. They're a developing child advocacy center and multidisciplinary team. So I apologize, this map was not updated since yesterday. So we now have 38 locations, formally covering 53 counties. And it's important to note that they are varying structures. So while they all have to meet the same accreditation standards, they can meet them through different organizations. So some of them are going to be affiliated with their children's hospital. So Dayton Children's Hospital, for example, has 2 children's advocacy centers affiliated with them, one in Greene County Michael's House, one in Montgomery County Care House. Franklin County Nationwide Children's has a children's advocacy center, the Center for Family Safety and Healing. So those are hospital based. We also have some standalone 501c3s. And then we have a few that are government based. Those are typically housed in your CPS, your Child Protective Services, but some of them are also housed in your prosecutor's offices. And then we do have one CAC that's actually in a federal qualified health center. So what's great is if you live in a community that wants to start up a CAC, we can advise you and help you start that CAC in a way that makes sense for your community. So what is a CAC? First and foremost, it's a child-focused facility. It's going to be comfortable and inviting. It also is going to address the physical, mental, familial, and environmental needs, and it provides services to the families to support the child as well, which is very important. That is the picture of an outside of a child advocacy center. This is a picture of what an inside waiting room might look like. And then this is the forensic interview room. And so the forensic interview is really at the crux of what a child advocacy center does. And a lot of times when you hear forensic interview, you think, wow, I don't know if a 4-year-old should have a forensic interview. You know, it can seem a little bit intimidating, but as you can see, the room's set up like a therapeutic room, and it will be the child and a trained forensic interviewer in the room. The process is explained to the child, and it's really about rapport building and making sure that that child feels safe to share their story. This is a wall at one of our children's advocacy centers, and every single one of those hands is a child that's been through the center. And you can see there in the center of the wall, hands are not for hitting, hands are for. And so this is really about empowering those children to take their body back and their body autonomy back. And they'll trace their hand if they would like, and then they write what they use their hands for. This is an example of what you might see at a children's advocacy center in a medical suite. So there on the right, you have a polar bear exam table, which I think is especially cool for little kids who are getting their medical exam done. And then on the left is actually a picture of ceiling tiles. And those are ceiling tiles that were painted by other child survivors and then put into the room to bring some comfort. This is an example of just some of the signs that you might see in and around a child advocacy center. Again, that trauma-informed space, trying to make it comfortable and inviting for the children and families. So it's also a multi-service center. Forensic interviews, we just saw a picture of what that forensic interview room looks like. It's important to note that this is an accreditation standard that everyone must meet. And that means that you have a trained forensic interviewer who has gone to the training. There are specialized evidence-based training types. It's a one-on-one interview. It's an opportunity for that child to share. It's not an interrogation. It's not going to be leading in any way. It's going to be neutral and fact-finding, and it will be live observed from the other multidisciplinary team partners in an adjoining room. It's also recorded and can be used in court. Again, all of those things are something the child knows before ever beginning the interview. A CAC will also provide trauma-informed counseling and specialized medical exams. So what that will entail is, if indicated, it'll entail a pediatric sexual assault nurse examination and a kit. We also have pediatric specialists that will just do medical checks, and then we can also do medical referrals. So a lot of times, the only time a child might have seen a provider, especially with some of our younger children, is the first time they come to the CAC. So it's not abnormal for our nurses or child abuse pediatricians to find an ear infection, a sore throat, and we also are equipped to go ahead and treat that as well, either through referral, getting them linked to a pediatrician that can be their primary care provider, or of course just treating them right there at the center. And then we also provide victim advocacy services. Trauma-informed care, this is something I'm sure that this group is very familiar with. It's understanding the impact of trauma. And this is actually something that we focus on as part of our accreditation standards. So all of our multidisciplinary team is going to go through trauma-informed training, making sure that we're adapting to each child and family's needs. We're going to use evidence-based practices, and we're going to consider all biopsychosocial aspects of that child and family. What is a CAC? It's also a coordinated investigation hub. So, of our 241 multidisciplinary team partners that responded to our most recent survey, 96% agreed that the Children's Advocacy Centers fosters collaboration on the multidisciplinary team. And I think that that's so important because for those of us who have ever had to navigate any sort of government system, it can be so frustrating when you're going to the prosecutor's office and then going to Child Protective Services and then going to law enforcement. And you're bringing your child with you to all those different facilities and you're telling the story again and again. And not just the fact that that story's not going to be exactly the same because we all know the way the brain works, but it's also not trauma informed and it's not what's best for the investigation. So a child advocacy center provides a space for all of those multidisciplinary team members to come to the center and wrap around that family. And you can see that the team members themselves are bought in that it does work. So this is a image that I like to share. I think it really puts into perspective what that family goes through. The picture on the left is what it looks like without a child advocacy center. So that family's there in the middle and they're trying to navigate the medical, the mental health, the prosecution, the law enforcement, the victim advocacy. And it can be daunting. And a lot of times families just simply don't have the time and won't or can't navigate that system. So with the multidisciplinary team child advocacy center response, you can see all of those team members wrap around that family. So you have your interviewer, your prosecutor, Child Protective Services, law enforcement, and all of them wrap around that family. They're doing the case review. They're all on the MOU with their protocols and procedures agreed to before that family ever shows up at the door to give them that seamless experience. So what does an MDT do? The core of the CAC is really the multidisciplinary team and the partners, and they're going to be the ones that respond to the reports of abuse. They also investigate the allegations. They're going to ensure that that child is safe. They will interview the child victims and witnesses. They're going to provide the medical treatment and exams, educate and support the families, review the cases, and of course, everything is the evidence-based, and our mental health treatment is going to be trauma-informed. Real quick, I'll touch on each of the roles, and with each of these slides, you will see that it says at the bottom, attend and participate in case review. That is because we cannot drive home enough how important that case review is for the process, not just to see if you can get a prosecution or if you can get quote unquote justice, but also it's what's best for the family and child in their healing journey. So the forensic interviewer is going to be a trained forensic interviewer that's going to interview the child victim. Again, that interview is going to be recorded. A lot of times that forensic interview is going to be used in court, or the forensic interviewer themselves is going to be utilized as an expert witness in court. Law enforcement, the big benefits for law enforcement is that they are not going out and interviewing these kids. They're watching the interview, and then what they're doing is going out and interviewing the alleged perpetrator, and they're deciding if charges should be brought or not with the prosecutor and the entire multidisciplinary team. Child Protective Services, of course, they're going to be involved in the case. They will substantiate or unsubstantiate the case. They're going to be in that case review. They're going to communicate with law enforcement and prosecution on any sort of follow-up that needs done for the safety plan for the child. And then they're going to participate in the entire multidisciplinary team process and case review. The victim advocate. The victim advocate for the family is really the person who's going to navigate the system with them. So they're going to refer them to the after mental health treatment. They're going to be sure that they're set up with any sort of court information that they would need if the case does go to court. They'll also do housing help with the families, any sort of food insecurity help. They will provide every sort of advocacy wraparound needs that that family and child needs to start their healing journey. Your mental health treatment. Most CACs have in-house mental health providers, but they also have linkage agreements with community mental health providers so that that child and family, one, has options, but two, we can be sure that if they have someone that they're already affiliated with, we would certainly want to refer back to them. And again, making sure that we're doing those wraparound services and participating in case review. The medical, one of the things that's so important in child abuse victimization is we say all of the time, and you will hear our medical providers say, it is normal to be normal. So what that means is a lot of times, especially in our sexual abuse exams, you will not find physical evidence of abuse. That does not mean that the abuse did not happen. And so the medical piece is so important, and having that medical provider a part of the multidisciplinary team to explain to your partners why it's normal to be normal, and to explain to the child, give the child an opportunity to ask questions about their body and ask questions about what's going to happen in the future for them. And then also to explain to the non-offending caregiver what they've seen and what they might see in the future. The prosecutor, they're going to be the ones that are leading on the decisions of the prosecution of the case. They're also going to be the ones that are evaluating that forensic interview and deciding if they're going to be able to use the forensic interview in court, or if they're going to bring in the forensic interviewer themselves to testify. The goal is certainly that we don't have young children testifying in court. I can't say that it never happens, but certainly with a child advocacy center response, our goal is that the child does not have to show up in court. And then I will highlight for you all our 2025 services. So you can see there we served about 12,000 kids in 2025. Of those 12,000, 25% of those kids were ages 0 to 5. So a fairly substantial amount of those children were age 0 to 5. And we know that the lifetime estimated cost of non-fatal child maltreatment is anywhere from $200,000 to $800,000 per person. So if we can get in there with a child advocacy center response and we can early intervene, we know that that child has better long-term outcomes because we're intervening in those adverse childhood experiences early. We're providing them with the wraparound services that they need for the future success. I think that's really important. Also, child advocacy centers on average save about $1,000 in investigatory costs per child abuse case, which is really important for our partners. And that QR code there takes you to our outcomes. If you go to our website, we have a statewide fact book. We also have our multidisciplinary team outcomes, et cetera. If you would like to dig in a little bit more, we would certainly welcome that. And then how you can work with CACs in your community. So of course, if you're a medical or a mental health provider and you would be interested in a linkage agreement, we would love to help facilitate that conversation. And then education and awareness. All of our local CACs are equipped to provide all of the prevention and education and awareness opportunities such as body safety, online safety, healthy dating relationships, prevention education, and many of them not just do it for school systems, they'll do it for community groups, boys and girls clubs, and then also parent groups. There's a special subset of prevention education for parent groups that many of them are equipped to provide as well on what to look for, what's appropriate developmentally, et cetera. And then we have the memorandums of understanding with our local counties. And of course, if you looked at that map and you're thinking, oh my goodness, we're one of the counties in white, we would love to help advocate for formal coverage in our county, please reach out and we would love to talk to you about formal CAC development in your area. That is all I have, and I am happy to take questions now, or that is my email. I welcome emails or questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Danielle. So much good information there. Thank you for the work that you do. If there are any questions, feel free to pop off mute or throw them in the chat. I want to give folks a second, but I always have questions. So before I jump in with what I'm thinking, I'm gonna hold space for anybody that's got questions for Danielle while we have her this morning. some flowers coming in the chat, thanking you for all the information and for the work that you do. Absolutely, I'll second that. Well, I will offer one question that's coming to my mind. I think throughout your presentation, Danielle, you mentioned mental health support pretty frequently, and I'm curious if you could just share a little bit more about what that looks like, what that means for infants and toddlers. And I'm also curious if the mental health support for infants and toddlers looks any different depending on the CAC, depending on the county.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, it does look different depending on the CAC and the county. Everyone has to meet the same standards, but how they meet those is a little bit differently. And unfortunately, we all know some are better resourced than others. But for especially the little kids, the 0 to 5, it's going to look a lot of play therapy. So that's certainly something that a lot of our CACs have. We, as a funding source, we get a lot of requests for sand play tables and other therapeutic methods that are better for the littles. And a lot of times what we see with the under 5 population is as they're playing and going through that therapy, they have further disclosures that they maybe didn't disclose in the initial forensic interview, but they're disclosing through their play therapy. The other thing that some of our CACs that are affiliated with our, with our children's hospitals, is they will also do some appropriate parental coaching where it's therapy with the child and with the parents. And so it can be kind of reunification therapy in a way. And a lot of what we see with caregivers, as you can imagine, is they need some help understanding how this happened and working through what's going on themselves. So we always want to be sure that we're providing the services and the referrals needed for the non-offending caregivers as well. And I will say, it's easy for people. One of the things that I always say at ONCAC is folks think that it's not, I've never known anyone that this has happened to. And I always say to people, unfortunately, you have. It's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. So everybody knows somebody that this has impacted. And the number of cases that we've seen is certainly not indicative of the cases that are out there, because we do know that this is underreported for a million different reasons. But largely, a lot of times we have kids aren't even aware that what is happening, especially with the little kids. And so I'll just say for this group, especially that's invested in the 0 to 5, something that we can do for little kids is teach them about body autonomy young. You can start imitating it at 0. This is my body. You need to ask to touch my body. And they need to understand that they should ask to touch other people's bodies and that they're allowed to say no. And what we mean by that is, even I know growing up, my parents, and it was not ill intent, but they'd be like, go give grandma a hug if I didn't want to. I should be allowed to say no to giving somebody a hug if I don't want to. And so I think it's really teaching kids at that young age, you're allowed to say no. If you don't want to give someone a hug, you don't have to give someone a hug. And so those are things we can do with the littles. And then also just being a safe adult, make sure that when they come to you, that it's an open, safe space, and that you're modeling the behavior of just that open, honest communication, and that body autonomy can really, really go a long way.
Thank you so much for that answer, Danielle. And it's making me think too about how there can be sort of this ambivalence around believing that mental health exists, like mental health needs exist for infants and toddlers. And I've certainly heard, I'm sure that others on this call have also heard this concept that babies don't remember things, or that anything traumatizing that happens in the early years, they're likely to forget. And of course, with the science of early childhood brain development, we just know that that's not the case. The science doesn't hold up there. So really appreciate that response, Danielle. Thank you. And what you were sharing in your answer too also reminded me that Danielle, if you are eager to hear more from Danielle, she did also write a guest blog for us, and that is up on our site, and it will be shared in our newsletter tomorrow. But if I could ask a fabulous Groundwork Communications team member. Thank you, Mary Jane, to share that in the chat so that you can read it as you are going on with your Thursday today. In the last moment that we have, any other final questions or comments for Danielle before I close us? All right, another huge thank you for joining. I see a comment from Elisa. Thank you for the important work that you and all the CACs are doing. We appreciate this information being shared today and enjoy the sunshine. Yes, I echo those sentiments. Thank you, Elisa. And thank you again, Danielle. This was really fantastic. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us this morning.
Thank you.
Take good care, everyone. Thank you for spending your Thursday morning with us, and we'll see you next week.